Hi, I'm Jack. I'm a second year degree apprentice with STFC, and I'm going to help you with the process of prepping, finding, applying, and interviewing for degree apprenticeships. In this video, we'll be looking at applying for degree apprenticeships and what happens in the first round of the process. If you've seen my previous videos, you hopefully know where and when to look for degree apprenticeships and the sorts of things to put in your CV and cover letter. So now it's time to start applying. I would recommend applying as soon as you see an opportunity open up, as some places may close early if they have a high number of applicants. Even if the closing date is weeks away, don't wait too long to get your application in, as you really want to be in the first wave of applicants. I've talked previously about where to find apprenticeships, but I'll put the links below again. After you apply, be prepared for what's often a very long wait. You may not hear back before the closing date, even if that is months away, and even after that, it may be more months before you hear anything. Alternatively, they might just never get back to you at all, or contact you to say they're not going to be recruiting anyone at all. I had that from DSTL. Applying for degree apprenticeships can be a frustrating process and also a disappointing one when you inevitably get an email saying it's just not happening or you didn't make it. The Student Room website is a good place to find out if other people have heard back from companies yet and when new opportunities are opening up. Anyway, hopefully at some point you will get an email from one of the companies you've applied to say you've been successful and got through to the next round. Often this is just the first round of many, and there'll be another round afterwards that will have a more in-depth interview or maybe a group or technical task. I'll look at those in my next video. The first round is often a telephone or online interview, or some psychometric tests that might include a personality test, situational judgment tests, or aptitude tests for things like numerical, verbal, or abstract reasoning. The first company I heard back from was JP Morgan, and this was a telephone interview. Don't make the mistake I did and sit by your landline waiting for the call while they're trying to phone you on your silent mobile phone upstairs. I was able to reschedule, but it wasn't the start I was hoping for. At this early stage in the process, the calls are often more about filtering out people who don't have the right to work, don't know anything about the company or role, or don't know why they want to work there. So make sure you're well practiced on these sorts of basic questions and have your CV in front of you in case they ask you to tell them a bit about yourself. Also, make sure to be enthusiastic. They're probably looking for enthusiasm as much as anything at this stage. Make sure you have somewhere quiet to take the call, speak clearly, listen carefully, and sound interested. You don't want just to be reading out answers you've previously written, as that makes you sound quite uninterested, but having some notes in front of you can help a lot in case you go completely blank. Now, often these early phone calls are a bit more friendly and relaxed, and the anticipation can be worse than the call itself. They are definitely preferable to the online interviews in my opinion, which I'll move on to next. Online interviews don't have any actual interviewer, you're just given a few short questions, a short time to think about each one, and then you have to record yourself answering them. Make sure you look smart for this. I always wore a suit and tie. There's generally not a lot of questions, maybe 3 or 4, but there's often a time limit which makes the whole thing much more stressful. There's always a test question so you can have a practice run before you start, and with some you have 2 opportunities to record each answer. I'd really recommend though that you record yourself beforehand on your laptop and watch yourself back so you can see how you look and sound. It's easy not to realise that you slouch or fidget, or that you look down too much or speak too fast. Consider asking someone else to view it and see what they notice and what they would change. Again for this, make sure to have your CV in front of you and any notes you need, and try to answer clearly and confidently. Now, I didn't really enjoy the online interviews, but the next thing can be just as bad or worse, and that is the personality tests. Now, in my opinion, personality tests are something of a blunt instrument, and I remember reading them described as an inadequate tool trying to accomplish an ambitious goal, and I couldn't agree more. Of course, at the beginning of them, they always tell you to answer honestly and don't try to guess the right answers, but if you don't, then there's a decent chance you'll never end up getting a job. If you want a job, then you need to know what they're looking for, and that isn't someone who, for example, doesn't enjoy working with others or is not flexible or adaptable. Personality tests often involve you rating how strongly you agree with different statements, or how far along a scale you are between 2 different opinions, to help the company work out your behavioural traits and work style. Now, I often found they actually make both extremes sound quite positive. So at one end you might have, I make decisions quickly and independently, and on the other hand, like you might have, I prefer to analyse all the facts and consider things carefully before making a decision. Now, I would advise you to avoid both the extremes and the middle. You can't just sit in the middle and say you neither disagree with everything, but at the same time, you don't want to be right out in the extremes, looking like you're completely indecisive, or you just immediately make decisions without thinking them through. Now, in, for example, a fast-moving sales job, you may want to come down more on the side of making quick decisions, but for degree apprenticeships, you generally want to give answers that suggest attention to detail, careful thought and precision. Whatever way you go, it's important you are consistent and answer with reasonable speed if it's timed. You will find that you get asked lots of similar questions over and over again. They might ask you how you prefer working with others or working independently several times, for example, but each time phrased slightly differently. If you don't answer consistently, and I would say in general come down the side of being a team player, then it could suggest you're not being honest. Again, if you take too long to answer, they might think you're carefully considering a question to figure out what the right answer is, which could be seen in a negative light. So for the traits they're likely to be looking for, it's often role specific, but there are 5 traits that are often known to be predictors for employee success. They're conscientiousness, being well organised, dependable, detail organised, and meeting deadlines. Agreeableness, being cooperative, compassionate, and a strong team player. Emotional stability, being able to manage stress, staying calm in difficult situations, and not expressing anger or anxiety. Openness to experience, being curious, imaginative, and willing to try new things, which often is indicators of being creative, innovative, and adaptable. And finally, being extroverted, being sociable, networking, a team leader, showing outgoing, energetic, and assertive behaviour. Now, with personality tests, I would say always come down the side that favours team working, good communication, conscientiousness, being motivated, adaptable and flexible, and coping well in stressful situations. But also read the job description and company values carefully so you can see what's important to this company and role. Also, don't lie too wildly. There's no point making yourself out to be extremely sociable and highly assertive if you're not. And when it comes to an interview, they'll see right through it and you'll just look dishonest. The next type of psychometric testing we'll look at are situational judgment tests. In these tests, you are given a scenario and then often 4 possible ways of dealing with it. Now, I prefer these to personality tests as there's often one right answer, one obviously terrible answer, and a couple in the middle. You might have a scenario where a teammate's falling behind. The options could be to yell at him that you've noticed he's falling behind and he should get it together, tell your manager he's falling behind and you're being left to pick up pieces, ask him if you can help and work out a way to improve things, or ask him if he's struggling and tell him what might help. Now, in this example, yelling at him is obviously the worst choice, and asking him if you can help him working out a way to improve things is clearly the best, as it shows empathy and team working. You might also have situations about conflict resolution, decision making under pressure, leadership or teamwork, but just make sure you value honesty, integrity, empathy, flexibility, communication, and team working. I always find it quite easy to work out the best and worst of the answers for each scenario from the answers given, so I wouldn't be too worried about them. It's often quite clear what you're supposed to pick. Now, at this stage, you may also find you have numerical, verbal, or abstract reasoning tests. And I'm not going to say too much about these because they usually just hinge on you having a decent ability in maths and English, and they shouldn't be too bad. Do make sure to read the instructions and questions carefully, though. They can be game-based, and it's normally a practice question or practice run to give you some idea of what you're going to be doing. One test that really stood out for me was a Vodafone pattern recognition one. Now, it started off okay, but by the end, I just didn't really have a clue and was just hoping for the best. Just like exams though, if there's multiple choice answers and you're not sure, try to narrow the options down and just go with your best guess. But don't give up and click any old option. So I somehow managed to get through to the next round with that, despite thinking I hadn't done very well. Okay, so that's the end of this 4th video looking at applying for degree apprenticeships and the first round of the process. In the next video, I'll be looking at the second round interviews and how to prepare for those.